easy it is for the NEB to rig the outcome in favor of approval if it overstates the benefits and callously dismisses the burdens. And that's just what they did. Facts show there are no existing Asian markets for Alberta's crude oil. They believe that this pipeline is necessary because they're being given false information about how much capacity is out there already and how much oil is going to be produced and how much needs to be shipped. Facts show the project should be rejected, but the board refused to consider the facts. Canadians have not been given due process, and without due process, permission for Transmountain's expansion will never be given.
Kinder Morgan hasn't gone more than 4 years without a spill happening since 1960. So they make these millions and they create these policies and they're not accountable when they make a big mess. What a profound thing. When One Nation in northern BC was offered $1.6 billion over a period of time and they had 1,000 people vote and it's 100% consensus to say no because you can't put a price on the land. Minister Oliver, he says, why don't the First Nations take the money? They need it. Just like the guy at the AGM goes, why don't you take it? You need it. Why don't you? And maybe we do, but we don't need it more than our reciprocal relationship to the land and water. And that's what I found traveling across the United States and traveling across Canada with rooms like this and people like you. What's happening in South Dakota was such a beautiful thing. When I was there, there's 150 chiefs from North America that went there to pledge solidarity, to say that when you need us, we'll be there. I'd like to thank Stephen Harper for uniting the First Nations across Canada more than they ever have. That industry can't stand up to the spirit of the people. And that's what's winning. That's the winning.
I stand here because we have protocols, because we still exist. We follow those protocols. Who are you? Where do you come from? If granted permission, how long will you stay? And how will this land and these people benefit from your time here? I am for the land. I am for Indigenous rights. I am for the protection of the land, air, water, and all the sacred lives that are on it. Because my ancestors are in this ground is why I do what I do. And I am not a proponent of violence. I don't want anyone to get hurt. We need to step it up. We need to act in different ways. We need to use our money. We need to use our bodies. We're being pushed and pushed to more direct action.
That's the current tankage, and the yellow tanks indicate the new tankage. So there's a significant amount of density increase in that facility, almost pushing tanks out to every available space. Because of the expansion plan, there's risks associated with multiple events. The event is almost designed to, if it progresses to a large state fire, be inextinguishable.
We note that Kinder Morgan still refuses to provide unredacted emergency response plans. They haven't fully given us the picture that we need to see to evaluate both the capacity and capability of Kinder Morgan and its staff or its contractors.
Why has Kinder Morgan refused to disclose its full emergency response plan? I think typically the reason you do not want to disclose your full emergency response plan is you don't want people to know what the risk is. Kinder Morgan themselves in their submission identifies, I believe it's a 5.2 kilometer potential outfall of sulfur-based gas in their risk assessment. Sulfur-based compounds that could be released from the facility are toxic, 5.2 kilometers. That's a significant outfall area, and that's a significant population. The risk analysis, in my viewpoint, that Kinder Morgan did for this proposal for the project was infantile at best.
We looked at their technical reports, we found that there wasn't sufficient information on seismic risks as it relates to fault mapping and assessment of site.
And just in summary, you have to the south there, you have very high life hazard areas. To the north in SFU, you have some very isolated areas that are difficult to move people away from, and a huge environmentally sensitive and valuable area to both the citizens of Burnaby, the city itself, and the entire community of Metro Vancouver.
They have not been inclusive and understanding and thoughtful and responsive to the community as a whole.
Numerous First Nations along the route, and in particular the Tsleil-Waututh Nation here at the inlet, have said no. And when the climate science is telling us that this is fundamentally at odds with Canada's commitment to lower its greenhouse gas emissions, what parts of the climate science and Aboriginal rights and title are confusing here? But the two key findings are these. One, Canada cannot expand oil sands production as is currently seeking while still meeting its Paris commitments. And two, if one reviews all of the pipeline and rail capacity for oil exports out of Alberta that already exist, we already have all of the transportation infrastructure we need. I also want to address a core argument made by proponents of Transmountain, namely that Alberta and Canada need more what's called access to tide water in order to capture a higher international price for oil and thus increase public returns. Now, this argument may briefly have been true at some point. It is not true now. So when our governments, in the face of all of these people in Alberta who are really feeling anxious, right? Feeling anxious about their economic security. And when they're told, well, access to tide water will be your ticket out. That's a false hope. That's not true. This is not the direction that we want to go.
What is implied by the commitments that the Trudeau government made in Paris? For Canada to remain in keeping with those commitments, and Seth touched on this as well, we will only be able to extract and burn a fraction of the coal, the oil, and the gas that is already in production. A fraction of what is already in production. And what that means is that we actually can't allow any new fracking, any new drilling, any more digging, and certainly no more pipelines. I did vote Liberal because, as so many other young people did this past election, I felt comfortable with Trudeau's promises when it came to climate action. This is not the leadership I voted for, because it is my generation that will have to live with the consequences of our government's current inaction. But the thing that has kept me going through all of it has been these powerful and beautiful comings together of people, young and old, who are all tied together by love for this place where we live. If this pipeline is approved, we will all stand to lose the livability of this planet and of this coastline. It's a mighty good thing our Prime Minister has said, governments grant permits, but communities grant permission. Because although our government is intent on breaking their promises, I have this vague feeling that we're not going to let them.